So this is my review on The Explosionist by Jenny Davidson. I actually filmed a review of this last night, but it ended up a huge ass mess, so I'm trying again. I apologise that this is a nighttime shoot, but I planned on filming it during the day today, and we ended up babysitting my little niece all day long, so there's no time for video reviewing when you've got a 2-year-old running around. So, yes, this is The Explosionist, and it came to my attention by my lovely friend Lara. Hello Lara, I love you. And it would have been almost 2 years ago she mentioned this in a book haul. I think her first book haul. Your first book haul, Lara. It was your first book haul on YouTube. And she mentioned that she had it, and then subsequently did a very detailed 2-part video review on it. I believe that that review no longer exists because Lara's taken quite a few of the videos down from her channel, which is way sad, and I mourn their loss. But I remember the review very well, and how original she said the novel was, and the fact that she mentioned in the book haul that it's very much an underrated, underknown YA title. And she wanted to give it a read because she thought it sounded very interesting and that it needed some love, because it's like a lost treasure amongst YA titles. So I thought, well, I love to give attention to underappreciated work, so I will pick this up at some point, and I did. I got it as a belated birthday present. Why? And yeah, it's difficult to say what genre this really falls into. I'd say it would probably be classified as steampunk. It's funny because steampunk really at the end of the day is quite specific in terms of a genre, and yet a lot of people try and apply the term often incorrectly. I'm going to put a link in the doobly-doo to a hilarious like rap song called Just Glue Some Gears on It and call it steampunk. It's very funny. If you've not seen it, you should watch it because it'll make you laugh. But I think actually this probably could fit the qualifications that would render it steampunk. So I think that works, but it's also alternate history. It's kind of an alternate universe that we're set in. It's set in Scotland, which is really a nice refreshing change of environment, and it's set during the 30s. I think it's meant to be the 30s, or is it the 20s? Either or. And this is a Scotland that's very different from the one that we know. The whole of Europe, the whole of the world really is altered because of a change in circumstances at the Battle of Waterloo, where Napoleon won rather than the Duke of Wellington. So as a result of Napoleon winning, an awful lot of things are different. We've got a lot of very well-known historical figures turning up throughout the book, and they are known in this universe for something entirely different from what we know them for. So, for example, it's mentioned here, she liked talking about stuff, whether it was the theology of Count Tolstoy, the novels of Richard Wagner, the verse of Albert Einstein, or the operas of James Joyce. So, as you can see, these folks, simply because I suppose Napoleon's winning created a different atmosphere throughout Europe, so they've gone off on different tangents in terms of their area of expertise. I personally don't know if I'd find the operas of James Joyce all that worthwhile. They'd be very long, certainly. And the verse of Albert Einstein would be curious. But yeah, so that was fun. Because I'm not a huge history buff, though, it meant that a lot of the time, even though I was sort of aware that something was meant to be amusing because it had been swapped around, I'm not all that up on the details of the actual historical facts, so I couldn't tell at times, so I'm kind of like, I think that's meant to be a change, but for all I know it could be what actually happened, I don't know, so I'm not too cluey with my world history. So yeah, it kind of left me in the dark a little bit, but I mean, Australia, for the most part in high school especially, all you do is the same 100 years of Australian history for 4 years straight. It's really dull. And then when I did go on to do advanced studies in history, it was ancient history. So, yes. And the focus is in Scotland, which is lovely because we're not in the United States, and we're not even in England. So, and England is an enemy of Scotland in this universe, which is interesting. The basic plot follows this lass here named Sophie, and she lives in Edinburgh. She spends most of her time at a boarding school, but on the weekend she goes home to live with her great aunt. Her parents died in an explosion when she was very young, and essentially Sophie gets propelled along a path of mystery and murder and mayhem, and she has to solve what the hell's going on. She comes into contact with a medium who leaves her this very ambiguous, strange message, and then the medium turns up dead. And it's all linked to a lot of political intrigue and shenanigans, and Sophie and her friend Mikhail, I don't know, I'm going to say his name incorrectly, but I'll put the spelling up there. Yeah, he's a childhood friend, they've known each other for years, and he's hanging around and trying to help her out with solving this mystery, and that's basically the gist of things. Yes, so I really wanted to love this book because it's such a favourite of Lara's, and because I know it's underappreciated, and it's something a bit different in the you know, overall landscape of same old, it seems to be the case in much YA. So I wanted to love it. It's not that I disliked it necessarily, but I was left very underwhelmed and often confused. Sophie, especially as a protagonist, confused me emotionally, especially right towards the beginning. She was having emotional reactions that I couldn't fathom or justify, and I was just left a little baffled as to why she was reacting the way she was. And I thought, am I missing something? Am I not understanding her emotional connections to these things? For example, her friends at school often tease her good-naturedly, and you know, with no actual malice behind it. They tease her about this crush she has on a teacher, Mr. Peterson, and at one point she gets so upset that she leaves school early and goes home early for the weekend. And I'm like, huh? And I thought maybe because it was just following an explosion that happened in the city, in Edinburgh, I thought maybe she's actually just really on edge because there was an explosion and it's reminding her of her parents. But that kind of thing, that link to her own history of explosions and the trauma that it would trigger was never really mentioned in the book. So I thought every time she had these responses and she got really worked up, I was kind of a bit confused. And I really did think that we'd have more of her backstory and find out a bit more about what had happened with her parents and why and things, but we didn't really. It was mentioned a few times offhandedly, kind of, but it didn't really come heavily into play in terms of how Sophie is as a person. So that, yeah, just much of the time I was like, I don't quite know why you're upset or why you're happy or I didn't know why she was feeling what she was feeling. She was a tricky girl to follow in that sense. In terms of like a narrative voice, she was okay. But I couldn't connect with her at all, really, and I couldn't get a fully fledged sense of who she was as a person. Mikhail, I'm sorry, I'm butchering the pronunciation, I know, but he was okay. He wasn't around all that much, so thankfully his presence wasn't too cumbersome, I guess, but his interactions with Sophie still felt quite natural and easygoing, which made sense given that, you know, they're not strangers to one another, they've known each other for many years. So that was a nice change. It wasn't as though she was just meeting someone suddenly and falling in love or something. They were old mates, so that was good. Even so, when she came to the realization that she was in love with him, it still felt... It wasn't necessarily that it was out of the blue because you knew it was going to happen, but there wasn't really any justification for it. It was just suddenly a realization, and she just thought, I love him! Yes, I do! And that was it. And I was kind of like, okay, don't quite know why, but alright. He was a bit irritating at times. I remember Lara, however, did warn me that he's very much a boy, and especially of his time, so he does occasionally say some flippant, slightly offensive, slightly sexist things. Sophie usually picks up on them, but she chooses not to argue with him a lot of the time, so she just rolls her eyes and ignores him. And so I guess because of that, he kind of had a bit of a feeling of being maybe a little immature. At least that's the sense I got about him. So I'm not going to spoil anything, but I was thankful that their relationship didn't really do anything too lovey-dovey throughout the book, which I thought was nice because I don't think they're ready for that yet, either of them. I don't know if emotionally they're at the point where that would be a good choice. I don't know if emotionally either of them are mature enough. Sophie's only 15. She's not yet 16, because that's a big plot point, actually, that she's not yet 16. I would say that the novel, is quite plot-driven, like plot-centric and action-orientated. So if you like novels where things are, for the most part, continually occurring and it's kind of sequence after sequence, event after event, propelling it forward, I think you will appreciate that aspect of the book. It's not nearly as centered, this will sound harsh, but it's not nearly as centered on character and relationships as a lot of the stuff I prefer to read. But certainly for those of you who like, you know, stuff to be happening, then I think you'll appreciate it. The mystery and the atmosphere of things are very, like, heavy throughout the book, and I think quite well crafted. Jenny Davidson, I think, did a really good job at creating this alternate history and was very clever in how she put it together. And also, given that it is an alternate history and you'd think that that sort of thing would require some info dumping, for the most part the information that we had to learn was delineated quite cleverly throughout, and in, like, you know, in bits and pieces throughout, sometimes put through dialogue and things, so it never felt too much like shoving a heap of info in your face kind of thing, which was good, and it meant that you were gradually coming to terms with the universe that this was taking place in, which was nice. What else do I want to say? Supporting characters even didn't really, no one really stood out to me, and usually, as you know, if I can't connect with the leads, I'll find a supporting character I really like, but there actually wasn't anybody in the book that I left at all. It wasn't that I was unimpressed with any of them necessarily, but none of them left a mark on me, so I can't single one out to talk about. The girls at the boarding school, it was interesting because even though for the most part this book avoids a lot of typical YA tropes, there were some, I guess, boarding school tropes that were in there in the boarding school scenario, and I was just kind of going, oh, I think maybe that's what's going on there. And in terms of personalities, they weren't necessarily stereotypes, but very recognisable personality types to an extent, and it was fun for me to kind of pick up on two characters in particular, and I thought, Gemma Doyle trilogy, I see what's going on there, but I don't know if that's where the story will take it, but yeah, I was kind of like, I see that. There's a sequel, I should say, to the book. It's called Invisible Things. I don't know if it's available on the book depository. I don't know, I remember distinctly that there's a location that does not carry Invisible Things. It could be the book depository, it may not be. I'll probably read it at some point because I did appreciate the originality of this book and the fact that it is trying to just do something different and be its own story and not be bothered by what everybody else is doing in young adult fiction, which was nice and refreshing. And I did very much appreciate that it was just a different story with a different environment going on, so that was good, but I just didn't really feel a connection to anything. Yeah, and some of the history left me a little confuzzled because I'm quite daft. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad that I picked it up, and I'm really happy that Lara loves it. I'm sorry, Lara, that I couldn't be a huge fan too. But certainly, if you want something different, and if you are a history buff, you'll probably enjoy all the little quirky moments a lot more than me because you'll recognise them. So pick it up if you can get your hands on it, because it's underappreciated, and we need to give our love to the books that aren't necessarily in the, you know, popular group that's getting the spotlight shone on them. Pick a wallflower book and grab it and give it some love. So I will give it 3 stars out of 5 for The Explosionist by Jenny Davidson.